5 years into therapy, my doctor pushed a consent form across the desk. Electroconvulsive therapy is the most effective treatment available, but there's a strong chance you'll lose a significant portion of your memories. I stared at the form for a long moment, then picked up the phone and called my wife, Celeste Kendrick. As always, the call was routed to her company's front desk. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hartley. Ms. Kendrick is in a meeting." The receptionist's response was brief and professional. The whole exchange lasted less than 3 seconds. 5 years ago, my mother died in an accident on the same day as our wedding. I left Celeste at the altar. After that, we were married on paper and strangers in every way that mattered. When I called to ask if she was coming home, the call would go straight to the front desk. When I needed a family member's signature for surgery, the call would go to the front desk. Even when I was falling apart and just needed to hear her voice, all I ever got was the receptionist's rehearsed reply. I opened our message history. She had read every single message and never replied to one. Yet just 1 minute earlier, she had posted on social media. Everett's POV. Celeste Kendrick had taken her first love, Kieran Vance, to the fair home coast to chase the northern lights and to Lake Corvin to watch swans glide along the water. This time, she had chartered an entire yacht for him, with fireworks that lasted through the night, all to celebrate 10 years since they first met. My fingers hovered over the screen. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my chest and reached for the consent form the doctor had been about to put away. "I'll sign it." Signing it took nearly everything I had left. The doctor took the form, glanced at it, then looked back at me with an expression I could not quite read. "You're not going to talk this over with your family first? There's a real chance you'll forget all of them." I shook my head slowly and tucked my sleeve down to cover the needle marks scattered across the back of my hand. "No, she doesn't need to know." I went into the operating room, and when I woke up, the first round of treatment was over. My head felt heavy and slow, and the doctor went over his instructions before I left. "Try to go over your old memories whenever you can, and keep taking your medication. I'm worried that if you don't, you'll end up forgetting who you are." I nodded, picked up a new prescription for sleeping pills, and went home. When I got there, my hand rested on the door handle for a long time before I could turn it. The door was unlocked. Light seeped out through the gap. Celeste was home. I was surprised. By my count, she had not been back in over a month. She heard me come in and turned to look, her brows furrowing as she took me in. "It's been a few days and you already look like death. Are you doing this on purpose to make me feel bad?" My hands stilled in midair. Something sharp twisted behind my ribs. I set the pill bottle on the table and noticed the cake sitting on the dining table. It looked familiar, but I could not remember ordering one. When I said nothing, Celeste stood up from the couch. "Don't think doing all of this is going to make me forgive you." Everything she said had a bite to it, but today, none of it was making sense. "What do you mean?" She did not answer. She just stared at me. "The receptionist told me you called today. What did you need?" "I was busy." The fog in my head cleared in an instant. I thought of the photos she had been posting, and something about the whole situation suddenly struck me as pathetic. Busy doing what? Taking trips with Kieran? Watching fireworks with him? Or were you too busy sleeping with him? Celeste's face went white, the kind of fury that came from being caught. "What the hell is that supposed to mean, Everett Hartley?" I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could get a word out, a sharp pain tore through my shoulder. Kieran had walked in behind me and slammed into me hard enough to knock me sideways. He draped an arm over Celeste's shoulder. The marks on her neck had not faded yet. The sight of them burned. "I told you there was no point coming back just for him. He calls you multiple times a month anyway. It's just for attention, yet you actually fell for it. You came all the way back here for nothing." Kieran's voice was light, almost bored. Yet Celeste believed every word he said. She always did. The room went still. She let out a cold laugh, and before I could react, she grabbed the cake off the table and shoved it into my face. Frosting smeared across my skin and dropped to the floor in clumps. I stood there frozen. The ache in my chest spread outward through my limbs, and the ringing in my ears grew louder. Celeste was still shouting, but her voice had blurred into something I could barely make out. "You've always loved playing the victim, Everett, but now you're playing mind games too? When did you learn to be such a liar? Oh wait, you've always been one. You lied to me 5 years ago." Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her chest was heaving. Then her gaze dropped to my wrists, and her eyes widened. She grabbed my wrist and yanked the sleeve up. When she saw the dense scatter of needle marks across my skin, she froze for just a second before letting out a sharp, humorless laugh. "This again." Even Kieran sucked in a breath at the sight. He pulled Celeste behind him and murmured something to calm her down. "Forget it. Don't let him get to you. I'll take you out for your birthday." He took Celeste's hand and started toward the door. As he passed me, he slowed just enough to lean in, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Look at yourself, Everett. What do you have left to compete with?" The door slammed shut behind them, and they were gone. It was only then, standing alone in the quiet, that I remembered. Today was Celeste's birthday. The cake she had smashed into my face was one I had baked for her myself the night before. I had just forgotten. I went to the bathroom and splashed water over my face again and again. When I finally looked up, the man staring back at me from the mirror was hollow-eyed with cheekbones jutting out. I looked like someone already halfway dead. I shook out a handful of pills and shoved them into my mouth, forcing them down dry. The bitterness spread across my tongue. I sank back into the couch, tipped my head against the cushion, and stared at the ceiling without moving. Celeste had always believed that I had lied to her, that I had betrayed her. 5 years ago, at our wedding, I had walked out in front of everyone. I left her standing there alone, and turned her into a joke across the whole of Mayworth City. That night, she grabbed me by the collar and screamed until her voice broke. "You did that on purpose, didn't you? You wanted to humiliate me." I tried to explain over and over. My mom was old, and she lived so far away. I never planned for her to come to the wedding. But she came on her own without telling me, and on the way there, the tractor she was riding flipped. She didn't make it. It did not matter what I said. She would not hear a single word of it. She pulled off her wedding ring and hurled it at the wedding portrait hanging on the wall. The frame crashed to the floor, and the glass shattered on impact. A shard even caught my face. Celeste stared at me through bloodshot eyes, her smile cold and thin. "You're still lying to me. I should have listened to Kieran and stayed away from you. They were right. You came from nowhere, and you just married me for the money." She turned away and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'll hate you for the rest of my life, Everett." After that, it was exactly the way she said it would be. We destroyed each other. After I walked out on our wedding, her first love came back to the country without bothering to hide it, and the two of them grew closer by the day. I became the punchline in every conversation. "Everett Hartley. You know, the one who married Celeste Kendrick? He shouldn't have bothered. She doesn't even go home." Oh, and get this. Apparently, Celeste and Kieran getting back together is all thanks to Everett. He practically set them up himself. 5 years of marriage, and every time I tried to reach her, my call was routed to her company's front desk. All I ever got was the same line from the receptionist. "Miss Kendrick is busy." Celeste never blocked me on any of her social accounts. Every post was deliberate, every photo curated. She knew I would see all of it. She wanted me to understand that she was doing just fine without me. The worst it ever got between us was 3 weeks after my mother died. Between Celeste's hostility and the weight of losing my mother, everything that had been pressing down on me finally crushed me. I broke down completely. I called Celeste's number again and again. "Please just let me talk to her. I'm begging you. Please help me." The receptionist's voice was cold and faintly disgusted. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hartley. Miss Kendrick has a very full schedule." The line went dead, and after that, the number would not connect at all. I destroyed everything in the apartment that I could get my hands on. When I looked down at the broken pieces scattered across the floor, I picked one up without hesitation and dragged it across my wrist. In the end, it was the housekeeper who found me and rushed me to the hospital. When I woke up, Celeste was sitting beside my bed. Her gaze drifted to the bandages around my wrist, and there was nothing in her expression but indifference. "Is this really the best way you can think of to get my attention? It's getting pathetic. Next time, cut deeper. And if you want to die, do it somewhere I don't have to deal with it." She stood up and turned to leave. I reached out and grabbed her sleeve with what little strength I had. "I wasn't lying to you. Everything I told you was the truth. Please don't do this to me." She shook my hand off and looked down at me. "Whether you lied or not doesn't matter to me anymore. I came here to tell you that I fired the housekeeper because of you. Is this just what you do? Ruin everyone who gets close to you." The side effects of the medication hit all at once. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe, and all I could do was gulp down air in shallow gasps. My vision blurred and dimmed. Sleep like this was the only kind that did not bring nightmares. The next time Celeste contacted me, I had just finished the second round of treatment. My head was still foggy when the call came in, and it took a moment before her voice registered on the other end, cool and clipped. "Company dinner. I'm sending you the address." That was all she said before she hung up. I stared at the dark screen for a long time, not quite able to process it. This was the first time in 5 years that she had reached out to me on her own. Her company held a staff dinner every 3 months as a perk for the employees. Celeste always brought Kieran. My pulse picked up, and I felt something close to excitement for the first time in a long while. When I arrived at the restaurant, the server at the front barely glanced at me. "Mr. Hartley? Miss Kendrick is in the private room at the end of the hall." The corridor was quiet. The sound of laughter only reached me when I got to the last room. When I pushed the door open, every voice cut off at once, and every pair of eyes in the room locked on me. The urge to turn and leave hit me immediately. I scanned the table and spotted Celeste right away, seated at the head. Kieran was beside her. There was no seat saved for me. I stood there for a while before finally taking the only empty chair, tucked away in the far corner. "What are you sitting around for? Have a drink." Kieran's comment loosened the strange tension in the room by a few degrees. A couple of employees knocked back their drinks and started getting bold. Miss Kendrick, you and Mr. Vance are always together. What is it about him that you like? That single question set off a wave of gossip around the table. Someone even shot me a pointed look. Celeste did not hold back, as if I were not even in the room. Kieran and I have known each other for over 10 years. Having him come on as my director makes me happy. As for what I like about him, I suppose it's that he's always been there. Someone whistled the moment she finished, and the teasing started bouncing around the table. They all knew Celeste was married. They all knew about the situation between us. And whether it was to suck up to her or simply because they found it entertaining, every question they lobbed felt like it was designed to humiliate me. Celeste treated me like I was not there for the entire evening. I understood now why she had asked me to come. She just wanted to watch me squirm. I kept my head down and stared at my plate, my grip tightening around my utensils. When the conversation turned to what Kieran liked to do, Celeste answered without a second of hesitation. He likes to travel. We've been to Nordvik, Altenbach, and the Fairholme Coast together. I already knew that. While they were off on their trips, I had been swallowing pills and scrolling through Celeste's photos like a fool. What about Mr. Hartley? The question landed on me out of nowhere. Every head in the room turned my way, and I looked up dazedly, locking eyes with Celeste. One of the employees who had been stirring things up grinned at me. You've been married to Miss Kendrick for so long. You must know what she likes, right? I opened my mouth. The words caught in my throat. My mind felt like it was wrapped in fog. I tried to search for those memories, but it was as if they had all slipped away. I forgot. Celeste's expression darkened instantly. She set her glass down on the table hard enough to make a sound, and the room went quiet. It was Kieran who broke the silence, raising his glass in my direction with a casual tilt. Not everyone can keep track of everything she likes. Don't give him a hard time. Here, have a drink. Don't kill the mood. A few people who knew both of us exchanged glances, looking like they wanted to say something but held back. Isn't he allergic to alcohol? Kieran looked surprised and glanced over at Celeste. Is that true? Celeste's brows furrowed, and she looked away. Her voice was hard and cold. I forgot. Just drink it, Everett. Stop ruining everything. I looked at her. My fingers were numb, and my head felt like it was splitting open. I picked up the glass and drained it in one go. Almost the instant I swallowed, Celeste shot to her feet, her face white. Are you out of your mind, Everett? It was strange. Celeste was the one who had told me to drink, and yet she was the one panicking. My stomach burned. Every breath was a struggle, and red welts were spreading across my skin. Everyone at the table looked shaken. Celeste held me up, her fingers trembling as she dialed for an ambulance. Did you do this just to spite me? You knew you couldn't drink, so why did you? You win, okay? I forgive you. We can have another wedding. We'll do it over. I could not make out the rest. All I remembered was being lifted onto a stretcher. Everything in front of me blurred. Celeste had said she forgave me. 4 or 5 years, that was all I had been waiting to hear. Somehow, now that I finally had, all I felt was tired. My voice came out raw and barely there. There's no need. Celeste pressed close, leaning near my mouth, trying to catch what I was saying. I steadied my breathing and managed one more sentence. If you want, we can get a divorce. Celeste's eyes went wide, filled with shock and fury. Her mouth opened but nothing came out. I was already unconscious. When I woke up again, it was the next day. The hospital room was empty and quiet. My phone was buzzing on the bedside table. There were over a dozen missed calls, all from other people. I picked up the first one, and the voice on the other end was frantic. What's going on with you and Celeste? She went and took wedding portraits with Kieran Vance. Are you two divorced? How could you not tell anyone about something this big? The voice was loud enough to send a sharp throbbing through my temples. Celeste's social accounts were still public to me. Her latest post was pinned at the top. It was her wedding portrait with Kieran, and there was a single caption underneath. I'm still waiting for you. My fingers hovered over the screen. Tears fell without warning, landing on the screen and beating up on the surface. I was crying, yet I did not feel sad at all. The weight I had been carrying for 5 years had finally shattered, and for the first time, everything felt light. The door to the hospital room swung open. It was my therapist. Mr. Hartley, what a coincidence. I just spoke with your attending physician, and he says you're fine now. Today happens to be the right day for your 3rd round of treatment. I glanced down at my phone one last time, then turned off the screen. All right. Before I went into the operating room, Celeste called. Everett, I'm at the studio right now. If you want to. Mr. Hartley, the procedure is about to start. We'll hold on to your phone for now. Celeste's voice faltered on the other end. Then it rose sharply. Procedure? What procedure? The call cut off before she could finish. The doors to the operating room closed inch by inch. This time, I was the one letting go first. The photo studio was filled with flashbulbs and the artificial scent of white. Lilies. Kieran was adjusting his cufflinks, posing for a second angle beside a vintage grand piano, when he noticed Celeste had gone completely rigid. Her smartphone was still pressed to her ear, but the line had gone dead with a flat, mechanical tone. Procedure? What procedure? Her voice had carried a sharp, shrill panic that made the photographer pause. Mid-click. Celeste? What's wrong? Kieran stepped off the platform, a casual, easy smile on his face. Did Everett call again? I told you he just saw the social media post. He's playing his usual routine to get you to rush home. Slap. The sharp crack echoed off the concrete walls of the studio. Kieran's head snapped to the side, his breath catching in his throat. Stumbled back a step, staring at her in utter disbelief, his palm flying to his reddening cheek. Celeste. Celeste didn't look at him. Her hands were shaking so violently she dropped her handbag onto the floor, the contents spilling across the polished boards. Her face was bloodless, her dark eyes wide and fixed on the blank screen of her phone. Mr. Hartley, the procedure is about to start. The nurse's voice had been cold, clinical, and efficient. It wasn't the voice of a receptionist. It wasn't a domestic dispute. It was the sterile machinery of a hospital operating wing. She turned on her heel and ran out of the studio, her heavy silk train tearing against the doorframe as she sprinted toward the parking garage. Celeste! Wait! Kieran called out, running after her into the torrential rain. Outside, but her sports car's engine roared to life with a deafening growl, tires screeching against the wet pavement as she tore into the traffic. 30 minutes later, the tires of her car skidded to a halt outside Mayworth Central Hospital's Neurological Institute. Celeste pushed through the heavy glass doors, her wet hair clinging to her cheeks, her white silk dress rumpled and waterlogged. She looked like a madwoman amid the quiet, sterile corridors. Everett Hartley, she shouted at the central nursing desk, slamming her palms onto the counter. Where is Everett Hartley? Which room is he in? The young receptionist shrank back, startled. Ma'am, please lower your voice. I am his wife. Celeste's voice cracked, a terrifying, guttural sound. Where is my husband? A middle-aged man in a dark gray suit and a white doctor's coat walked out from an inner office, holding a metal clipboard. It was Dr. Aris, the chief of psychiatric medicine. He looked at Celeste's ruined dress, her mascara-streaked face, and the diamond ring glittering on her right hand. Mrs. Kendrick Hartley? Dr. Aris asked, his voice devoid of any warmth. You're 30 minutes late. The third session of Mr. Hartley's treatment concluded 10 minutes ago. Celeste's heart gave a violent, sickening thud. What treatment? What are you talking about? He was admitted for an alcohol allergy last night. Dr. Aris looked at her for a long, silent moment. Then he turned and gestured toward his private office. Step inside, Mrs. Hartley. It's time you looked at your husband's real medical file. The office smelled of old paper and stale coffee. Dr. Aris set a thick, blue folder onto the desk and slid it across the glass surface to Celeste. Mr. Hartley was admitted to our outpatient psychiatric unit 5 years ago. Dr. Aris said flatly, leaning back in his chair. Shortly after the death of his mother, Mary Hartley. Celeste's hands hovered over the blue folder. His mother died 5 years ago. You didn't know? Dr. Aris raised an eyebrow, a flicker of genuine revulsion crossing his weathered face. Mary Hartley died on June 14th, the day of your scheduled wedding. She was riding an agricultural transport from her village to the city train station when the vehicle overturned in a storm. She suffered massive internal trauma and died at the scene. Celeste's vision went completely white. June 14th, the day Everett had left her standing at the altar of the Mayworth Cathedral in front of 300 high society guests. The day she had vowed to hate him for the rest of her life. The day she had opened her doors to Kieran Vance. No. Celeste whispered, her throat dry, her lungs burning as if she had swallowed glass. No, he lied. He told me she was sick, he said. He didn't lie, Dr. Aris interrupted coldly. He left the cathedral because the highway patrol called his phone with the identification request. He spent his wedding night in a county morgue, identifying his mother's crushed body alone, while you were throwing your wedding rings into the harbor with Mr. Vance. Celeste's fingers dug into the edge of the desk until her nails turned purple. Then, why didn't he show me the death certificate? She rasped, tears overflowing her eyes, dripping onto the blue folder. Why didn't he force me to see it? He tried, Dr. Aris said, opening the folder to a yellowed page. He brought the certificate home 3 weeks after the funeral. But according to his therapy intake notes, you threw a crystal picture frame at his head, cut his face, and told him that if he mentioned his mother again, you would destroy her estate. Celeste gasped, a choked, pathetic whimper escaping her lips. She remembered that night. She remembered the sound of glass breaking. remembered seeing blood trickling down Everett's cheek, and she had laughed, telling him it served him right for trying to make excuses for his cowardice. What is this procedure? Celeste choked out, her hands shaking as she pulled open the second section of the file. Why did the nurse say he was in an operating room? Dr. Eris reached out and flipped the page for her. Lying on the paper was an official, notarized consent form bearing Everett's neat, elegant signature, dated 3 weeks ago. Protocol, bilateral electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, extended memory erasure. He has severe treatment-resistant major depressive disorder, DR. Eris explained, his tone clinical and unyielding. His nervous system has been in a state of continuous physical collapse for 48 months. He has severe insomnia, chronic digestive failure, and a history of severe self-harm. Dr. Eris pointed to a secondary chart. He came to me 3 weeks ago. He asked for the maximum legal voltage setting. He wanted the treatment specifically targeted to erase his emotional attachment nodes, specifically the memories associated with his marriage. Erasure? Celeste's voice cracked into a shriek. You're wiping his memory. We are offering him a medical chance at survival, Dr. Eris corrected sternly. Because if he continues to carry the weight of his guilt and your psychological torture, Mrs. Hartley, he will be dead before the end of the winter. Dr. Eris stood up, walking to the door of his office, and pulled it open. He is in Recovery Ward 3. You can see him now. But I advise you to prepare yourself. Recovery Ward 3 was small, white, and flooded with the pale afternoon sunlight pouring through a barred window. Everett sat on the edge of the narrow hospital bed, wearing a plain gray cotton gown. His hair was damp from a towel dry, his pale face smooth and quiet. The dense scatter of needle marks on the back of his hands was covered with fresh white gauze. He was looking out the window at a flock of pigeons resting on the ledge, his expression completely tranquil. The heavy door clicked open. Celeste stood in the doorway, her waterlogged dress dripping onto the linoleum floor, her body shivering, her chest heaving as she stared at him through a wall of tears. Everett, she whimpered, taking a slow, agonizing step into the room. Everett didn't jump. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away in shame, nor did his eyes darken with the bitter, exhausted pain that had defined his gaze for 5 long years. He slowly turned his head. His dark eyes were clear, bright, and completely hollow. He looked at her face, at her ruined dress, at her trembling hands, with the polite, mild curiosity one might offer a stranger who had walked into the wrong elevator. Hello, Everett said smoothly. His voice was soft, clear, and devoid of any rasp or tremor. Are you the attending physical therapist? Celeste froze in the center of the room, the world falling out from beneath her feet. Everett, she gasped, taking 2 frantic steps forward, reaching out her hands to grab his shoulders. Everett, stop it. Don't do this. It's me. It's Celeste. Everett did not pull away, but he didn't lean into her touch either. He sat perfectly straight, looking down at her hands on his shoulders with a subtle, polite discomfort. Celeste? He repeated the name softly, as if testing the taste of an unfamiliar foreign word on his tongue. Miss Kendrick? The doctor mentioned your name earlier. He offered her a faint, courteous smile. I believe we were married on paper. I'm sorry for the inconvenience my medical stay has caused your company's schedule. The doctor told me we are in the process of finalizing the legal separation. Celeste's breath hitched violently. She reached up, frantically cupping his cheeks with her freezing hands, weeping uncontrollably as she pressed her forehead against his. No separation. Everett, look at me, she screamed, her tears soaking into his collar. I know about the wedding. I know about your mother. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Everett. Please hate me, hit me, scream at me. Just don't look at me like this. Everett blinked, a slow, unhurried movement of his dark lashes. He reached up, gently and firmly taking her wrists, and moved her hands off his face. His grip was light, courteous, and entirely unyielding. Why would I hate you, Miss Kendrick? Everett asked, his voice filled with genuine mild puzzle. I don't remember you doing anything to me. He looked at his own bare wrist, then back at her face. In fact, I don't really remember much about you at all. He leaned back against his pillow, pulling the thin hospital blanket over his lap, and picked up a paperback book from the bedside table. The doctor said my discharge papers will be ready by 4 o'clock, Everett added, his tone conversational and calm. You don't need to stay. I'm sure you have a very busy schedule. Celeste stood beside his bed, her hands hanging limply at her sides, staring at the man who had spent 5 years drowning in a hell she had built for him, and realized that her punishment wasn't his hatred. It was his complete, absolute, and unrecoverable peace. Celeste did not stay in the hospital room. She couldn't. The quiet, polite space around Everett felt like an iron vacuum that was crushing her chest. She drove back to the Kendrick Enterprises corporate headquarters at 300 miles an hour. The glass doors of the executive floor shattered as she kicked them open. "Miss Kendrick." The head receptionist jumped up from her desk, her face pale. You have a conference with the board in 10 minutes. "Give me the call logs," Celeste said, her voice dropping into a register so dark it made the 3 assistants nearby freeze in terror. Pardon me?" "The private call logs for my line for the last 5 years." Celeste walked up to the desk, her eyes bloodshot, her wet dress leaving a dark trail across the marble floor. "Every call from Everett Hartley. Right now." The receptionist swallowed hard, her fingers trembling as she typed on her keyboard. "Miss Kendrick, Director Vance gave specific instructions regarding Mr. Hartley's calls 3 years ago." Kieran gave instructions? Celeste's voice was dangerously quiet. She walked around the desk, grabbed the computer monitor, and turned it toward herself. On the screen was a private, restricted routing script installed on her executive line. Routing rule number 104. All incoming calls from source Everett Hartley intercept automated front desk script number 3. Ms. Kendrick is busy. Direct notification to Celeste Kendrick, disabled. Forward summary log to Kieran Vance. Celeste stared at the code. For 5 years, every single time Everett had called her, when he was bleeding on the bathroom floor, when he was lying in the hospital with acute depression, when he was standing alone in their empty house on his mother's death anniversary, the call had been systematically blocked, hidden, and erased by a script written by Kieran Vance. And every single time, the receptionist had been paid a quarterly bonus from Kieran's private account to recite the same 3-second line. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hartley. Miss Kendrick is in a meeting." "Miss Kendrick, I was just following Director Vance's orders." The receptionist whimpered, backing against the glass wall. "He said Mr. Hartley was an abusive ex-husband who was trying to extort company funds." Clack. Celeste grabbed the desk phone and hurled it through the glass window of Kieran Vance's corner office. The heavy glass panel shattered into 1,000 glittering shards, raining down onto the plush carpet inside. Kieran, who was sitting at his mahogany desk reviewing the press release for their wedding portraits, jumped up in shock. "Celeste, what the hell are you doing?" Celeste walked through the shattered glass frame. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She walked up to his desk, picked up his heavy brass desk nameplate, Director of Development, Kieran Vance, and slammed it straight into his face. Crack. Kieran let out a bloody shriek, stumbling back against his leather chair, blood spurting from his broken nose, covering his immaculate white shirt. "Celeste, are you insane?" Kieran screamed, clutching his face, blood dripping through his fingers. 5 years, Celeste whispered, stepping over the desk, her eyes completely black, filled with a murderous, terrifying rage. "You hid his mother's death. You blocked his medical emergency calls. You installed a routing script on my phone." Kieran's eyes widened in sudden, absolute terror. He backed up against the floor-to-ceiling window, wiping the blood from his mouth. "Celeste, listen to me." Kieran stammered, his voice high and shrill. "I did it for us. He was a nobody from a village. He didn't deserve you. He left you at the altar. His mother died in a tractor crash on the way to the church." "Kieran," Celeste said, her voice dropping into an icy whisper that made the air in the room freeze. Kieran's breath caught in his throat. "You knew, didn't you?" Celeste asked softly, leaning in close to his face. "The police report from 5 years ago. You were the one who picked up his phone at the hospital when the highway patrol called." Kieran couldn't speak. The silence in the room was a confession louder than any scream. Celeste reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone and tapped a single speed dial button. "Security," Celeste said calmly into the microphone. "Director Vance has been terminated effective immediately for corporate espionage, unauthorized network tampering, and grand fraud. Have the legal team file criminal charges with the district attorney before 5 o'clock. And have 2 guards throw him onto the street." "Celeste, no. You can't do this." Kieran shrieked as 4 heavy security guards burst through the shattered glass door, grabbing his arms and dragging him backward across the bloody carpet. "I love you. I've loved you for 10 years. Celeste." Celeste didn't look back. She walked out of the office, stepped over the broken glass, and walked out into the rain once more. Over the next 48 hours, Mayworth City's business community witnessed a systematic execution. Kieran Vance was stripped of all corporate titles, his personal bank accounts frozen pending fraud investigations, and his name blacklisted across every commercial sector in the province. Within 2 days, his family's minor investment firm went bankrupt, and he was served with a multi-million-dollar civil suit by Kendrick Enterprises. The golden boy of Mayworth High Society had been reduced to a penniless disgraced pariah overnight. Meanwhile, Celeste bought a small, modest cottage in the countryside, a house identical to the one Everett had described in the early days of their relationship, with an oak porch and a garden facing south. She hired the city's finest decorators to furnish the townhome on Maple Street, filling it with the soft, warm wooden furniture Everett had once picked out in a catalog 5 years ago. She bought the green tea he liked, the books he had read in college, and the simple linen shirts he used to wear. She was trying to rebuild the world she had systematically destroyed. On Friday afternoon, the legal dissolution papers were delivered to the house. Everett sat on the sofa in the living room, wearing a clean beige sweater. His face was healthy, his skin warm, his dark eyes clear and calm. He had completed his 4th round of ECT. The doctor had declared his severe depression in functional remission. He no longer needed sleeping pills. He no longer suffered from night terrors. He looked at the papers on the table, then raised his head as Celeste walked into the room. She was wearing a simple, unadorned cotton dress. She brought out a tray with a warm cup of sweet tea and a slice of fresh blueberry cake, the cake he used to bake for her every year. "Everett," Celeste said softly, setting the tray down, her hands trembling slightly. "The doctor said you can eat sweet things again." Everett looked at the cake, then offered her a polite, warm smile. "Thank you, Miss Kendrick," he said smoothly. "That's very kind of you." He picked up the silver fountain pen beside the documents and turned to the final page. "Everett, wait," Celeste's voice cracked. She dropped to her knees beside his chair, her fingers tentatively hovering near his knee, afraid to touch him. "Please don't sign it yet. Give me 1 month. Just 1 month. Let me take you to the coast. Let me show you the swans at Lake Corvin. Let me be your wife." Everett paused, the pen hovering an inch above the signature line. He looked down at her tear-stained face, at her red eyes, at the desperate, agonizing plea in her gaze. He felt no anger. He felt no betrayal. He felt no urge to throw the cake in her face or remind her of the 5 years he had spent sitting alone in the dark. To his mind, she was simply a woman who had been generous enough to let him stay in her house while he recovered from a bad illness. "Miss Kendrick," Everett said gently, his tone soft and entirely reasonable. "The doctor explained our history to me yesterday. I know we had a very difficult 5 years, but I don't remember the pain anymore." He smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "And if I don't remember the pain, it means I don't remember the love either. Holding on to a paper contract when there's nothing left inside doesn't make sense for either of us." He lowered his hand and signed his name in smooth, elegant strokes. "Everett Hartley." He set the pen down, closed the folder, and pushed it gently across the table toward her. "I've packed my small suitcase," Everett said, standing up from the sofa. "A friend from my old university offered me a position at a historical archive in the southern province. The climate there is warm, and the work is quiet." Celeste sat on the floor, holding the signed divorce agreement against her chest, weeping silently as she watched him pick up his single leather bag from the hallway. Everett reached the front door, paused, and turned back to look at her one last time. "Thank you for taking care of my medical bills, Miss Kendrick," he said, offering her a slight, courteous bow of his head. "I hope you find peace." He opened the door and walked out into the bright, golden afternoon sunshine. 3 years later, the coastal town of St. Jude was quiet, surrounded by rolling green hills, white chalk cliffs, and the vast blue expanse of the ocean. In the center of the town square stood a small 2-story stone building with a sign that read, "Hartley Historical Archives and Bookshop." Inside, the air smelled of old paper, cedarwood, and lavender. Everett sat behind a wooden counter near the window, wearing a comfortable wool cardigan, meticulously restoring the binding of an ancient leather book. His skin was tan from the coastal sun, his face full and healthy, his dark eyes clear, bright, and completely unburdened. He was 32 years old, and he looked younger than he ever had in Maywood City. A bell chimed above the front door. Everett looked up, setting his brass bone folder down. "Welcome to Hartley's. Let me know if you need help finding anything." A woman stood in the doorway. She wore an expensive dark gray trench coat, but her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, her dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. It was Celeste. For 3 years, she had run Kendrick Enterprises from afar, handing daily operations to a professional management board, spending every weekend traveling from city to city, tracking every quiet lead until she finally found this small, coastal town. She stood near the entrance, her hands clutching her handbag so tightly her knuckles were white, tears immediately welling in her eyes as she looked at the healthy, radiant man standing behind the counter. "Everett," she whispered, her voice cracking with an unbearable, agonizing weight. Everett stood up from his chair, a polite, professional smile breaking across his face. He walked out from behind the counter, stopping 2 paces away from her. Good afternoon, ma'am, Everett said smoothly, his voice clear and warm. Are you looking for a specific regional map, or just browsing? Celeste's chest heaved. A ragged sob caught in her throat. She took a slow, trembling step forward, reaching out her hand, her fingers hovering inches from his wool sweater. Everett, it's me, she wept quietly, her tears dripping onto the wooden floorboards between them. It's Celeste. Do you really not remember me? At all? Everett looked at her face carefully. He looked at her red eyes, her trembling lips, and the deep, permanent lines of grief carved around her mouth. He searched his mind, searching through the quiet, peaceful archives of his clean slate. There was no memory of a wedding, no memory of a hospital floor, no memory of an altar, a broken frame, or a 5-year nightmare in the dark. There was only the warm afternoon sun shining through his shop window, and a customer who seemed very sad. I'm sorry, ma'am, Everett said gently, offering her a clean white linen handkerchief from his pocket. I suffered a severe medical memory loss a few years ago. I don't believe we've ever met. He placed the handkerchief gently into her trembling hand, gave her another courteous, warm smile, and walked back behind his counter to continue his work. Celeste stood in the center of the quiet, sunlit shop, holding the clean white cloth, looking at the man who had once loved her more than his own life, and realized that her eternal sentence was to remember every second of the love she had thrown away, while he lived happily ever after in the beautiful, merciful silence of his forgetfulness.